All right. Hello, beautiful nerds, and thank you for being here. Thank you for making a commitment to your health process. Today, Ruth and I are going to be reintroducing movement projects to the 2022 Foot Nerd experience. And I say reintroducing because in the previous iterations of the Foot Nerd project, we had various projects. Um, and these were things like positions to reclaim, beam progressions to master. There was even a meditation challenge and a fasting challenge. And early on in the new framework, Ruth made an observation that we were sort of lacking a movement component in block one. So she added some little movement challenges in there. But after some discussion, we decided it would be a good idea to reintroduce a new version of project specific to movement. And so movement projects are going to be a way to sort of give structure to an underlying aspiration that I think we should all share as foot nerds, which is to restore natural movement patterns and positions. So in this brief video, we're going to cover sort of four main parts. We're going to talk about the concept of movement projects, why they're important, talk about accountability, and then the notion of this being sort of a template and not a prescription, so that there's both, there's kind of like a broad array of, there's flexibility if you want it, but there's also some structure if you are more keen to require more structure to achieve your objectives. So let's start with just the concept of movement projects. And Ruth, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, what came to mind when we first started talking about movement projects, and then we can dive into the more concrete stuff of like exactly what it is.
Okay. So I started thinking about the movement projects. Well, one of the things that we've talked about ever since I've been a foot nerd and listening to the big picture of what the Foot Collective and the Foot Nerd experience was going to be was that we would continue to evolve. And we would have this hive mindset, this emergence that would just take place because we have a lot of really keen people learning so many different things and from so many different backgrounds and varieties of experience. And what I noticed as we started with this new framework is that we have a big variety of people in different parts of their movement exploration and their movement journeys, like people with injuries who are just starting to notice, or people who are just starting to go barefoot, and people who have been living this lifestyle for a really long time and really use movement as, move all day and are not sedentary exercisers. Or so we have so many different varieties. And then, so we've evolved very quickly is what I'm noticing. So in the Foot Nerd program, when I first started, we had a set of projects that we would all go through, and they were rigorous, like the beam projects, the ninja squats on the beam, but because all this information is also accessible to a lot of people in the public, people who are in the Foot Nerd experience now have also already started to progress along the pathway. And so that's why I think it was so great on your part to create this structure where everybody can design their own projects.
Yeah, I think the self-directed part of it is really important. So let's just briefly talk about what is the movement? What are movement projects? And the concept was to create for each nerd to create a new movement objective for themselves with each 60-day block. So there's 6 blocks of 60 days, a 2-month chunk. You basically pick your own experiment that you want to do for those 60 days. And that project has a couple different elements. So number one is choosing the objective, right? And I think that's really the most important part, because it has to be something practical and something you have a high motivation to want to achieve, and it has to be realistic also. So basically choosing what you want to accomplish, turning that objective into something very concrete, right? Something very specific, designing a recipe or a plan in order to achieve that objective, logging data as you work towards it, and then sharing with your partner and your pod what you're working on, and then also looking to them and the Foot Nerd community at large for support, right? Like we have some Foot Nerds that are like hand balancing experts. Mm-hmm. Some Foot Nerds are really good at juggling. And so we have all these diverse people with these different movement skills and expertise. So we have a big group of people to be able to look to for help and support. And so sharing it with others so that others can witness your progress and so that you can witness theirs, whether it be the challenges or the wins or the insights that are gained. And then including sort of like a mini debrief inside that 60-day period to basically reflect on, okay, well, how did this movement project go? Did I achieve what I wanted to achieve? What were the big struggles? What were the things I learned? How do I take what I learned with this movement project and apply that in next block's movement project? So I think the concept is create a movement project for yourself of something you want to work on for the next 60 days. It doesn't have to be every day, but craft a plan to say, this is my objective. This is why I want to achieve that objective. This is my plan. And then this is the concrete objective that I'm going to work towards. And yeah, I think that that loosely held self-directed structure is a template. So it's not to say like you have to do it this way, but it gives someone like a blueprint to be able to, it's like a coloring book, right? You get the book, there's a bunch of lines, but how you color in that book is totally up to you. And so what we're trying to do is give a blueprint for a 60-day rolling movement project that can be carried through the program.
Mm-hmm. It's so great. And I want to illustrate, because I've been through the Foot Nerd program a couple of times, that many of us really love to move and do different projects, but the constraint of the 60-day part is just so exciting to me, because
why is it exciting to you?
It's exciting to me because it forces me to choose something. And then within that constraint of 60 days, it's like you eliminate the freedom, the burden of choice, right? So like,
yes.
I personally love working on handstands, but I find that I procrastinate. I do a little bit of everything, or I'll start one thing and then a couple of weeks go by and I haven't really given myself to all of the things that I love to do. So the 60-day constraint is so great. I'm excited because I'm practicing this as we go along too. So I find myself thrilled to have a project to work on for 60 days. And then I don't have to think about anything else. I know what I'm doing. And so I like the idea of the structure and the freedom, but the constraint is actually, I think, really important. And this was something that the Foot Nerds spoke to us a lot, or I've observed as the Tribe Mama. We had this accountability buddy channel in Slack. And it was so funny, Nick, because we started off holding each other accountable, but there was like actually not enough constraint in there. Like we didn't have a time frame. I think this was the missing piece actually. And then the accountability channel, nobody was accountable for accounting for anything. And we just kind of drifted all away from our projects. So I think this is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I think the constraint and the clarity of a concrete goal within that constraint period basically just facilitates focus, right? It eliminates your choice to be distracted and to find the new shiny thing to work on because the old one's not as exciting, right? And sharing it with others.
Or when it gets hard.
Or when it gets hard, yeah. And I just think it's a really good practical application of incorporating the principles of behavior design into your own life and into your own learning process. So I just want to talk about why do we feel these movement projects are important? I have a couple points listed. So oftentimes a structured approach to achieving an objective and having a real plan in place facilitates you actually meeting that objective. I think these movement projects are going to be a beautiful self-directed outlet for play. So intentionally choosing what playful movement challenge you want to embark on, I think is it's like continuing to maintain the notion of play, but doing it within a structured context so that you actually have like a path ahead, right? Like in order to get to where you want to go, you got to know where you want to go first. And oftentimes we define it so loosely that we get lost, not because we're not focusing on it, but because we didn't actually set a clear enough intention of where to go. I think it's also a really good opportunity to sort of witness and be witnessed by others as we work towards goals. It's also, I think, a really good application of setting realistic and concrete objectives, creating an explicit plan, following through on that plan, and working through the struggle and reflecting on the struggles you worked through and the wins that you had, right? We're just like kind of formalizing this into a sort of a tighter experiment, right? Instead of just like a free for all, it's like buckle down on some constraints to give you a tighter framework to work within. And I think that clarity will really help. And we talk about behavior design, that formula by BJ Fogg: behavior equals movement, ability, and prompt. So, picking an objective that you may not have the ability to do now, but is realistic for you to gain the ability. Engineering prompts, which can just be like a checklist or putting a piece of equipment somewhere you walk by every day. But I think the element that is really important is when we decide what objective we want to embark on, we have to have a high enough motivation to want to achieve that. Like, the reason for wanting to do this has to be high enough, has to be important enough and meaningful enough to us that when it gets hard, the motivation will supersede the difficulty of the challenges. So I think it's a really cool practical application of behavior design, really. Let's talk about accountability, because I think everyone defines accountability different. And I think most people think that like someone has to force you to do, like, the picture I think most people get is like, with accountability, is I get a personal trainer that yells at me if I don't do things or makes sure I show up. And I don't think that's really like an accurate portrayal of the way I think about accountability, because most of the accountability in my life is self-accountability. And to hold myself accountable, I have to have something really concrete so I don't fool myself into thinking I did what I said I was going to do, because I didn't define it very tightly. So yeah, what are your thoughts on accountability and how it relates to the movement projects?
The accountability, there's like synonyms for accountability, like you're saying. I think we get maybe caught up in those old definitions, or like what maybe like parenting, or kind of like somebody supervising your situation. But I think like a mirror is a good synonym for accountability. Like, if I tell my learning partner that what I want to do is for the next 60 days to work on my jump roping skills, then I think what that does is just reflect back to me that I said I wanted to do that.
Right.
So it's that being
It's like a
witnessed
social
and
contract
witnessing.
you've created.
Yeah. And then what I was saying earlier before we started recording is that I find that you start to feel the resistance creeping in. Like, I don't know what I want to tell my learning partner. I don't know what I want to do. I don't, but that kind of squirming in your skin a little bit is like that process. It's like, how do I narrow it down? What am I going to say? Is it going to be true? I think those are the physiological, like visceral signs that we're on the right track. If you start to feel that squirmy feeling, if you're not practiced at this, some of you may just be like, oh, I've been doing this for a long time, this is like a no-brainer. But and then you pick like, hand gliding through Australia or something as your goal. But the witnessing part, I think, and the accountability, what I find is that like little by little, there's like these pathways that are laid down in accountability where it starts to bleed into the rest of my life, where I just start to hold myself accountable naturally for not procrastinating, like I was telling you, on media tech, kind of like calling the customer service at the GoPro guys, which I've been putting off for a year. All of a sudden it's kind of fun, like something, when you start to have success with somebody that you're working with, and then like little dopamine squirts get in there, where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm on the right track. And being accountable to myself is actually kind of fun.
Yeah, I think that's confidence, right? It's like,
Yeah,
oh wow, I actually set an objective and I have the tools now to plan how to do it. And I know the little nuggets that I have to do to build up to reaching this thing. So it's not as intimidating. And then I actually reached it. And now I have more confidence to set more ambitious goals, or to set, goals that will push me to grow beyond my current abilities in a way that I wouldn't have done before. So yeah, I think the knock-on effects are huge. Even with just setting a movement project for each 60-day chunk, can result in so many personal insights that carry over into other areas of your life that might be completely unrelated. So yeah, I can, that resonates with me a lot.
And Nick, it's pretty hilarious because, as you know, I'm with a group of foot nerds who are auditing, we've been through the foot nerd program before, and I'm on day 3, and I feel so excited. Like, I just putting the stuff in my proof of work log.
Yep.
I feel like I'm on a high or something. Like right before we started recording, I was like, oh my God, this feels so great. I am accountable.
I think you're in the honeymoon phase.
I'm in the honeymoon phase. I'll let you know how it goes.
There you go.
Day 3. It's day 3, Nick. It's day 3.
There you go. Day 3. That's I mean, it's about stringing days together, and that's like that is the work. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, and then I'll go through a couple just kind of examples from my life of recipes of just tangible examples. And the last thing I want to cover is that this is a template, not a prescription. And so it is up to every individual to customize their movement project to make it their own. Maybe you don't want to do 60 days. Maybe you want to do 30 days. Totally up to you. These are just suggestions. I think the big things to get across are choose a meaningful objective. If the most time you spend is just sort of musing on what thing do I want to choose to do, it's better to take longer in choosing what you're going to work on for the next 60 days than it is to choose something without putting thought into it and then losing motivation or being like, it turns out that wasn't really something I wanted to do. So spend lots of time and energy thinking about what you want your objective to be, and also design some flexibility, right? Like if you meet your objective in like 22 days, you're like, well, that was a bit too easy, build on top of it. So make it your own. I think another point is that success should be based on getting the work done and following your plan, not necessarily the outcome, because the outcome is just like something in the distance that you want to reach. The path to get there is uncertain. There's no right or wrong path. Whether you actually reach there or not is not actually even the most important part. The important part is, did you put an honest effort into meeting the plan that you created and moving towards that objective? Not necessarily whether you actually got there or not. And how far you end up at the end of that 60 days is a really good lesson of building or creating achievable, realistic goals. So it's really just about learning, not necessarily the objective. So I want to give a couple just examples of recipes, which is really just a tightly knit sentence saying what I want to do concretely, how I'm going to do it, and what are my prompts, or what am I going to use to hold myself accountable. So right now I'm learning how to play the darbuka drum, which is like this Turkish drum. So my recipe that I use every day is practice for at least 5 minutes every morning between 8 and 9 a.m. For 30 days straight. And I have a daily checklist where I literally check it off and I can look at that checklist. That checklist is my proof of work. The drum is somewhere I have to walk by every day. So that's my prompt. Looking at that daily checklist is also my prompt. And, even though I say at least 5 minutes, it's often closer to like 20, 30 minutes. But if I just do 5 minutes, I can check my box off. So that's kind of my recipe. Practice at least 5 minutes every morning, working on new skills between 8 and 9 a.m. and have a daily checklist to kind of write off each day that I've done that. Another one that I did at one point was learning to juggle. So the objective for me was be able to juggle for 60 seconds straight without dropping any of the hacky sacks. And my recipe was practice every evening right before I eat dinner and have a daily checklist that I mark it off. So that checklist, putting the hackies somewhere that prompted me to remember to do that, in that daily checklist that I already have a habit of checking every day, was my prompt. And then the last one, an example with balance, would be something like the objective of being able to be balanced in tandem stance, which is one foot in front of the other on my beam for 90 seconds per side without falling. And the recipe would be practice every morning for at least 5 minutes, test myself weekly with seeing how close to that objective am I getting, and have a daily checklist that I mark off every day I put in the work. So those are just some examples of recipes. I don't know if, Ruth, you have any tangible examples of recipes you've made in your life?
Well, Nick, as you know, I have not been at this as long as you have. So
That's okay.
just listening to your recipe, I see where the hole in my recipe is.
Where is it?
And it's in the time, it's in committing. I evidently have a problem with commitment.
So do I. I think anyone who doesn't say that may not be being honest.
So I haven't created the actual time. So in the past, I've done some similar, I follow your lead a lot. So I got that head punchy thing where Nick turned me onto this thing that's a headband, and it has this elastic ball on the end, and it comes back at you and you punch it. And so I would do that, but I wouldn't commit to the time. Like I've gotten better. So I have one recipe that I do, and it's the one thing that's stuck, but now it's time to build on it. So I get up every morning before, like, I turn the coffee pot on and I go against the wall to do handstands. But I've mastered that against the wall handstand, Nick,
Nice.
about a year ago.
There you go. Check that box off.
And so now I have to build on it, and I think I have to set a concrete time.
Hmm.
So now the handstand against the wall has become kind of remote. I'm not remote, rote. It's like it's a
Yep.
no-brainer. I'm on autopilot. I go
Yep.
in, I do my handstand, I'll get a little blood in my brain. I'm like, yeah, that's good. Let me go drink my coffee. But now I'm ready to work on the recipe a little bit better.
And it's not like, there's nothing wrong with these things that we do that
Mm-mm.
we're like, there's always layers
Yeah.
of awareness that you can attach to something, right? Like just going into the upside, getting inverted,
Oh yeah.
is like a ritual for you. But like feeling your wrists differently, playing with your breath, playing with your toe, like there's so many layers of
So
detail that you can
many.
go into. So it's like even the mundane things can become a quest for mastery by just trying to go into deeper detail. So
Yeah. And I
yeah,
just want to say one thing about I just want to say one thing about not being so hard on ourselves, right? Like if
yep.
I never did anything else with the handstand, the fact of the matter is, like you're saying, is I go and I do a freaking handstand against the wall, which is, it's something for someone in my 50s that's great. It's a part of my health ritual. It's not like it's not I don't need to be pushing myself so hard. Like it has to be
Right.
play, but we are holding each other accountable, and that is a blind spot because I do want to progress to being able to do a handstand in the middle of the ground.
Hmm.
I mean, in the middle of the room without a support. So I need to make up a new recipe, add some ingredients. I gotta put some salt in that batter.
Yeah, there you go. Add some spice to it. I think self-regulation of knowing when to create a more ambitious objective versus when to just feel good that you're showing up and doing whatever you've already
Yes.
mastered is very important, right? Because it's so easy to always be setting objectives that are intense and like you have to do them. But sometimes it's just, you have to just self-regulate and be honest with yourself, where it's like, and even from a little physiotherapy based nugget, the best way to maintain shoulder health is through either traction or compression, because that's what lights up your whole rotator cuff in a very and helps center your humerus in your scap socket. So just putting load through your shoulders every day is incredibly good for shoulder health, even if it's just for like 10 seconds. Just like
Mhm.
hanging on something is very good. So even just your ritual that you have right now has huge benefits from a maintenance perspective.
Mhm.
And then it's really just, am I motivated enough to actually bite off a bigger objective? And if I am, what is that? What's the next tiniest step that I can bite off of? Right? Instead of saying I want to walk 100 yards on my hands, it's like, well, maybe I want to see if I can get 10 seconds with my feet just off the wall. And that's the next tiny step. And so, every time you have to increase the intensity of your objective, you're kind of learning different ways of engaging with the next tiniest step. And overshooting is part of the learning process, right? Like you bite off more than you can chew. You're not motivated because it's too intimidating. It's like, okay, well, that's a lesson that I tried to create a too my objective was too ambitious. So what's the rewind of that? What's the intermediary? And that in and of itself is a huge learning moment and insight that you can put in your health log. So that's pretty much it. So we're in this, we've created a lesson file, which is 1.11, which kind of has a framework of what we just covered, but also a bunch of notes that Ruth and I wrote. It also has some kind of like the start of an idea list, where if someone is struggling to choose an objective, there's positions, skills, strength, mobility, and maybe there's other categories we can add. But I think the goal with this is, over time, nerds can submit suggestions of movement projects that they've embarked upon. And we can even add a section for layer 2 conversations in this kind of bonus lesson file for block 1, where nerds can talk about their block 1 or any movement project they engage with, and sort of like just tell the story of the wins, the challenges, the lessons, the insights that they've learned. And over time, the hope is that these sort of idea lists can grow and provide a menu for people to be able to choose from, right? If you're not super creative or you don't know where to go, these are at least ideas that can maybe stimulate some creativity or provide some initial projects that you can just sort of tease out, try, and see where you go. So that's it. That's it for the Movement Projects video. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being a foot nerd and leading by example.
Yep.
And we'll catch you in the next lesson.
And this is proof of work, Nikki Pop.
It is. It is proof of work. And your
Yep.
movement projects and your health blog and just listening to this, having this go into your brain is proof of work. So thank you all for being here.
Ciao for now, friends. Ciao for now.